Okay, now we've got some error outlinks. On the internet, nobody knows you're a dog. Let's see if oh, look at that. Is everyone familiar with that? It is probably the most famous internet security cartoon out there, certainly as far as it goes. You probably can't read what it says on the bottom. Peter Steiner, reproduced from page 61, July the 5th, 1993. It is 20 years old this year. And the trouble is, it's horribly true, which is why people use this time and time again in presentations. It is so true. On the internet, nobody knows you're a dog. And that's the nub of the problem we're facing today. We're actually facing more problems than this. This is the updated version of this cartoon. You can read the cartoon at the back. It says, "How the hell does Facebook know I'm a dog?" My favourite story of the last year was Facebook, makes suggestions of people you'd like to friend. So this woman was sitting there on her Facebook, and it suggested she'd like to friend this other woman. And she said, "I don't know her." Turned out it was her husband's other wife. They're both divorced. Well, one's divorced and one was bigamy anyway. But how the hell does Facebook know I'm a dog? So it's how do we contrast this problem of anonymity on the internet and the ability to be who you like and spoof anybody out there versus the privacy question of how do we make sure that we don't have this. And it's squaring that circle, and it's a real problem. Anyone remember this, since we're delving into history? 9 years ago, the famous Bill Gates quote, 2 years from now, spam will be solved, 2004. Anyone believe that? Here are the spam statistics. And as you can see, it's trogging along quite nicely at about 70-80%. And being that actually home users don't get the level, believe it or not, do not get the level of spam that corporates do. Certainly at one point, when I looked at my corporate spam statistics a few years back, we were running for December one year at 98%. All incoming email was spam. Seriously crazy. Fraud. Let's talk about fraud. So I'll leave this blank for a second. The guys out there have, why do they do this? The old adage of the psychologist who went into prisons to talk to bank robbers, and he said, "Why do you rob banks?" And they said, "Well, because that's where the money is." The bad guys out there, why do they do this stuff? Because they aim to get money out of this. What are they mainly after on the internet? Yeah? What's the biggest target? Actually not. Yeah? Come on, what's the biggest target out there? What are the bad guys trying to get off your home computers, your corporate computers, your other bits and pieces? Passwords to get you access to what? Money. How do they get money? Mainly credit cards. Credit cards is where the thing is. You can buy credit cards. If you go onto the Carter forums out there, the organised crime people will give you all the statistics. I can't. That's what they're after. They're after ultimately credit card information so they can get money. Yeah, that's why they rob banks. So anyone care to guess, before I show you the figure, last year, card not present fraud, because that's where the big money is card not present fraud, because we've put chip and pin in, haven't we? Well, in Europe we've put chip and pin in. In America they haven't. It's coming this year, I'm told. Anyone care to give me a rough guess of in dollars last year's card not present fraud figure for the globe, the world? Come on, shout a number out. 100 billion. Actually, a little higher at 100 billion. Card not present fraud, currently, last year's figure, the banks won't tell you this figure, you have to calculate it for yourself, running about $21 billion a year in card not present fraud. And guess what? Visa, MasterCard, and American Express and Diners Club are still making profits, so who's paying for that? We are. Absolutely. So should we be concerned? Absolutely you should. If you chunk that up, total credit card fraud, CNP fraud is about 65% of credit card fraud, all credit card fraud, it's the big percentage. So that makes total credit card fraud about $30 to $32 billion a year. And that's just credit card fraud. That's before you get onto corporate espionage and, you know, all the other types of fraud that goes on. But that's where the big money is. That's why the bad guys are trying to infect your home machines and steal your banking information. That's before they start emptying your bank accounts. That's not included in that figure. So that's what they're trying to do with fraud. Why? Because once I have that 4-digit PIN and I have the little CVV number, the 3 digits on the back of your card, and the strip that's written in plain English across the front that says this is my credit card number, it's easy to impersonate you. Very simple, with a little bit of extra information, and pretend to be someone else on the internet. And that's what they do. Why? Well, this is the problem. This is the problem statement. There is no good standard ways for entities to assert their identity on the internet. Goes back to the cartoon of 20 years ago. On the internet, nobody knows you're a dog. You can be whoever you like. What happens when you set up Outlook Express for the first time? Yeah, out of the box, new installation of a PC, fire up Outlook Express. What did it say to you? So, who would you like to be? Doesn't it? So a 7-year-old setting it up goes, oh, I'll be Mickey Mouse today, won't I? So they go, yeah, okay, Mickey Mouse. Oh, what email address would you like to send from? Okay, mickey@disney.com. Thank you very much. You can now send email. We don't have to make it easy for them, don't we? Now, okay, that's an example of a 7-year-old playing, you know. But if you want to try it, if you want to scare your chief executives, take their corporate email address, go into a generic copy of Outlook, set up their name, their email address, and then send them an email from themselves. I would recommend you tell them first you're going to do it, otherwise it's a bit of a career-limiting move. But it really does make the point very quickly to your chief executives how easy and, more importantly, how important this information security stuff is. Because it's so easy to impersonate people on the internet. I talk about entities. This is the list of entities. I also work for an organization called the Jericho Forum. And this is your definitive list. I would argue, we can debate this afterwards, I would argue this is your definitive list of entities. So users, devices, organizations, code, and agents. Agents are a special case. It's more coming soon for agents. But those are your list of entities out there. And they all need identity on the internet. How many of them currently have identity on the internet? Very few. Good identity, strong identity. How many people use PKI certificates on their corporate PCs? Okay, how many people use Active Directory? Did you know that it's a 1-bit flip in Active Directory, in the master schema, to switch on certification for every single one of your corporate PCs? But it's not in a standard. Yeah? So you can have identity on every single PC in your organization for the total cost of 1 minute work. But none of you are doing it. Because no one's told you. So therein lies the nub of the problem. So let's talk about how you extend this globally, because this is the problem. Remember we said this is about standards that work globally. Because there are lots of identity solutions out there, and we all sit in our own little silos doing identity. And the reason that actually the Peter Steiner cartoon is still true 20 years on, because we're all doing identity in our own little silos. Even people who are reasonably joined up. So in terms of examples of reasonably joined up, UK banking is probably the most joined up banking group in the world. Believe it or not. So actually, how many of you have been issued by your bank one of those fancy little card readers that you put your current account card in? Yeah? Everybody? Unless you bank with the NatWest. NatWest will issue a one-time password token. Their card readers are all interoperable. And this, of course, you're using American Express. So your American Express won't work in your card reader, but all your other UK bank cards will. Diners card doesn't either. Yeah, so we're not very good at doing joined up. So let's talk about the sort of, what we call the 6 conundrums of global identity. So the target really is here. Bring your own identity. Can you have one identity? Because I'm Paul Simmonds at the end of the day. I'm me. I only have one identity. You only... We've got a few schizophrenics in the audience. We only have one identity, yeah? We're us, aren't we? So, can I have one identity, please, that I can use on the internet? What's stopping me doing that? Well, here they are. First of all, you've got to connect the wetware to the software. Yeah, me to whatever digital format you need to do identity over the internet. Because face-to-face it's really easy, isn't it? We use, well, face-to-face. Faces. It's what humans use. Yeah, over the internet we can't do that with any degree of ease, and it's really difficult to get computers to do facial recognition. Is anyone using the facial recognition at the airports at the moment with the new biometric passports? Yeah? Does it work? Oh, it's about 60% of the time, isn't it, I think, is their current hit rate at the moment. So yeah, computers doing facial recognition doesn't work. Humans do facial recognition. It works really well face-to-face, which is why we use the term. In the digital world, we need to do it digitally. So the first one is, we need a linkage between me and the device. Yeah, and it needs to be what we call immutable. And we need to be able to test that immutability so we can feed it into one of Andrea's risk calculations to do risk. Because that's how we do things. 2, it needs to be global. So will the US accept a Chinese ID and vice versa? And the answer is no, not at the moment. Not how we currently do it. Is it persona based? Because people use persona. You and I use personas. Yeah? Standing before you today, you are seeing my corporate professional persona. Yeah, you know a little bit about my personal persona because I've chosen to reveal it to you that at some point in my life I had a wife. I told you that earlier. But you know nothing else about me. You don't know how many kids I have. You don't know my sexual orientation. You don't know anything else about me. You don't know anything about my sporting persona. You don't know anything about, etc., etc. People segregate their identities. And this is to do with attribute aggregation. Yeah, so I keep attributes of my personas separate in those personas, and I choose to reveal them to groups of people. Can you assert attributes from authoritative sources? So the Americans are doing this. Anyone heard of NSTIC? It's a very American acronym. So the American government have launched this thing called NSTIC, which stands for National Strategy for Trusted Identities in Cyberspace. Yeah, horribly American. The American lawyers, because you know what American lawyers are like, the American lawyers are going ape at the moment because of this question of liability. So if I assert that someone is over 21 and they go and buy a drink and they weren't over 21, who's liable? And who's liable to get sued, being American? So, can you assert attributes from authoritative sources? So if you look at my citizen persona, which has my date of birth, my sex, my place of birth, and my right to be a UK citizen, who should assert that? Yeah, who should sign the assertion? Should it be me? Should it be Verizon? Should it be Capita in the UK? Or should it be UK government? Well, I'd argue it should be UK government. Should sign the assertion, because they are the authoritative source. This is computing 101. This is nothing to do with security. This is computing 101. Master data in the master source, one place only. Privacy enhancing. Can I control digitally where my personas are held? And finally, is it extensible to anywhere that needs identity? So can you deliver this in a form factor and with standards so that everybody can use it no matter where? So the guys out in the village in Africa where they don't have electricity, they don't have fixed phone lines, they don't even have running water, but they do, guess what, have mobile phones. Probably only 1 or 2 per village. Can you have strong identity in that environment versus what we take for granted in the West? So, extend that to the internet and restating the issue. There is no good standard way for entities to assert identity on the internet. So there, again, just repeating is the problem statement. And if you didn't need to know that passwords are dead, anyone not agree that passwords are dead? Because everyone says it, but guess what? Anyone not using passwords? Anyone got rid of passwords? No. Right, so everyone's using passwords, but we all agree they're dead. So shame on us, because we're still not doing anything about it. So, this is the standard joke, isn't it, that we see out there with the yellow stickies, and, you can guarantee if you're one of the big 4 and you do an audit, you can go round and you can lift up the keyboards at 6 o'clock at night and you'll find someone who's got a yellow sticky under their keyboard with their username and password for the system they access once a month. Because they can't, which uses a different username and password. This is my favourite. If you can't see it at the back, this is one of these high security, door locks which you have to press the code to get in, and they've changed it. So what have they done? They've put a piece of paper on the front that says new code, C1560X. Yeah, which totally negates that. It might as well just be an open door. We've experimented with these things. Yeah, we talked about credit cards earlier. So anyone believe that this is more secure? This is a one-time password generator linked to a standard MasterCard. Yeah, so you can press the numbers on the front, you get a one-time password code, and away you go. More secure? Less secure? I'd argue this is less secure. Why? Because you've got a risk imbalance. You now have an ecosystem. You now have an identity ecosystem that is based on flawed logic. The ecosystem now assumes that you have a stronger front end, mainly because you've paid extra money to generate these things. However, you've now made it more difficult for the person to remember not a 4-digit password anymore, that it's a multiple-digit password, and now you have a problem. You don't know how strong the authentication is, how that, what we call immutable binding, remember that word up front, the immutable binding between person and device is. So yeah, if I've been well trained, and I'm a security guy, my wife does not know my password. Really annoys her. But I will not tell her my password. I'm a security nerd at the end of the day, and I have been for the last 20, 30 years. Yeah, so my password I will not tell her. Passwords I will not tell her. But the reality is that isn't the same for most people. So what do most people do when they can't remember something? Same as they do with the yellow sticky piece of paper, they do that. They either write it on the card, and we've seen that an awful lot of times, or they write it in a notebook, or they share it with their family, or they use a common set of passwords. We do it within my family. I'm sharing another bit of my persona with you. Yeah? So all the family, we have SIM card locks on our mobile phones, which again is fairly unusual, but remember I'm a security nerd. But we all use the same one as a family. Yeah, so we can use each other's phones if they happen to be locked, which is really useful on occasions. In America, where it is a lot more common to give your credit card to your kids and let them go shopping with it, when they introduced chip and pin in April this year, what's going to happen? This is going to happen. So now you have a risk imbalance. You have an assumption that the ecosystem is more secure, and you have the wetware, the people at this end of it, who are defeating it and making it even less secure. So you've gone from moderately secure with a 4-digit pin that everyone kept secret, so actually worse. What about this? Who's got the little PayWave symbol on their new credit card? Yeah? More secure? No, absolutely not. Less secure. So what have they done to limit the risk? Yeah, less than 20 euros a day. Currently, you're allowed to spend on this magic PayWave thing. And above that, it's normal chip and pin, so that's not too bad. The brilliant thing is, if you go and read the Visa website, it says this, that it's securely exchanged between card and terminal using the highest level of cryptography. Which is bullshit, isn't it? Because at the end of the day, the flaw is that we don't know who's using the card, because it's straight possession. So again, we've got this risk imbalance, this flawed security assumption. We've got some neat crypto going on here, and zilch going on here. So ultimately, most of not being able to solve the problem comes down to this. Who is using the token? We don't know. And like building your house on the sand, if you don't have the foundation that is secure, well, guess what? The ecosystem isn't going to work either. And people always defeat high security solutions. No matter how good you put in, people will find ways to bypass them. So how do we fix this? So let's talk, for the last 5-10 minutes, let's just look at a little bit of future gazing and say, okay, so how are we going to fix this? Well, first of all, you have to architect systems, especially secure systems, but any system for how people are going to operate. Because if you don't, people will defeat it. So, first of all, design identity to work as personas, because that's how people operate. Secondly, you need to be able to assert the binding between the device and the entity. Because if you're going to do this remotely, so as a remote user, I need to know, as part of my risk equation about whether I'm going to transact with you, I need to know the connection between whatever thing said digitally, he is he, and what degree of certainty do I have that it actually is Paul Simmonds at the end of that transaction, rather than the bad guys trying to add to their $30 billion that they took last year. So in terms of immutable binding, this is a guy called Tom on the left. If you want to learn more about Tom, Tom is a series of 5 2.5-minute cartoons up on YouTube. Go and Google or search for Jericho Forum and identity, and you'll find the Tom cartoons up there explaining about how humans do identity, and then move on into what we need to do to fix this. So this is a guy called Tom, and you'll find a little bit more about Tom in a second. Tom, core identity, yeah, this is the I am me bit, to this is the digital representation of me. So we call core identity the me, core identifier the digital representation of me. And what's it need to have in it? Well, you need to be able to assert the binding, you need anonymity, you need the issuer to assure the binding, and you need preferably biometrics to do levels of binding. But you might not. You might want to say, I'm just in possession of the device. But as long as the recipient knows that the binding is purely the guy has it physically, and there's nothing else to prove it, you can add that to your risk calculation. Tom is a baker, and he operates in 2 personas. One is village persona, which is where he grew up and lived, and the other is his town persona, where he sells his bread. And this is how village persona and town persona limits attribute aggregation. So basically in the village, he uses his personal stuff, and in his town he uses his business stuff, and the two don't interconnect. Now we've got the inability to aggregate attributes. Currently within the Western world, you only need postcode, sex, and date of birth to positively identify to a single person 85% of the population. Those are the only 3 attributes. You don't need name. It's the only 3 attributes you need to positively identify to a single entity 85% of the population. Quite scary. So attribute aggregation is really important. And remember when I said UK government owns Citizen? It's really important because they own sex and date of birth, that they don't own postcode. So how does this work? And as I said, these slides are going to be available, so this is a bit of an eye test. But as you can see, what we can do is we can take core identity and core identifier, so this is the digital clever bit, and then we can create a number of personas. So, you know, my employee persona, banking persona, anonymous persona, like eBay, reputational trust, citizen persona, signed by the UK government, and now you have bring your own identity. This works. The Austrian government have actually got a pretty good working implementation of this. It's not totally correct, but it's pretty good to prove the concept. And there is some really neat stuff going on, particularly on some of the European projects at the moment, European funded projects to do a lot of this. So what does this lead me to be able to do? So this is, so let's say I want to buy myself a really state-of-the-art big flat-screen TV. Yeah, 4K televisions, anyone? Yeah, the new state-of-the-art high-definition tellies that you can just buy, $60,000, away you go. Highly nickable. Yeah, that's what the guys want to steal and sell down the pub. So, I take my core identity and my core identifier, my digital representation of me, and I take my citizen persona with an address, probably registered with the post office in the UK because they're the authoritative source of where my mail's delivered. I take my credit card persona, which is registered with Amazon, so it's registered with Visa. And I take my e-commerce persona, probably registered with Amazon. Now all of these personas are jointly signed between the identifier me and Amazon, Visa, and let's say the post office down here. Now I can assert that I want to buy this, it's my credit card, and here's the delivery address. And down here, because of the crypto sitting behind this, I am the only person who can have asserted, guaranteed, all those three pieces of information together. So now you can ship this in the certain knowledge that it's not fraudulent. Well, 99.9% anyway. A lot better than we have today. This is doable if we want to get our head around it. So, distributed personas. Why do we need distributed personas? So distributed personas are good. So this is our friend Tom again. So, you know, core identifier, entity Tom, with some of his personas. This is his Tom Bond 006.5 persona, and his sort of tourist persona and his personal persona. Because ultimately, you're going to get hacked. We all know this. Look at how, well, you saw Andrea's list of how many high-profile hacks there were last year. So we have to plan for things going wrong. And I'm hoping this is going to work. Okay, so let me explain. Basically, very simply, the assumption is that the bad guys come and steal this guy's persona. They can only get this persona because these are held separately in different places. The important thing is that you might get the information contained in this guy's persona, but because the crypto for the persona is held up here, actually you might steal the information, so you might know my date of birth is the 28th of February. You won't be able to assert it remotely over the internet, and that's really, really key. So again, in terms of design for failure, the same way as you design an e-commerce system. So if you're designing an e-commerce system, yeah, in a classic, you know, what they will teach you here at university or whatever, you know, 3-tier e-commerce system, presentation layer, business layer, and database layer at the back end. The assumption when you're designing that is the presentation layer, the web front end, is going to get hacked. That's why you put firewalls in between the two layers. That is your working assumption. The bad guys will always get the front end. Yeah, so the assumption is that one of your personas are likely to get hacked. But if they hack it, they get the information, but they don't get the ability to assert that information cryptographically over the internet. So it's useless to them, for a large extent anyway. The Americans would have you do this. Under NSTIC, what is being proposed by the commercial organizations involved in NSTIC is this, that we give you a one-time key. Remember that one-time key up front? We give you that magic one-time password key like a secure ID token or whatever, and it gives you access to a super repository. And in your super repository, you put everything about yourself, all those personas. So, you know, your date of birth, your postcode, your inside leg measurement, your 10 fingers, your 2 eyeballs, everything about you. And then this super repository will assert on your behalf all these various personas. And we've been trying to point out to the Americans that actually putting 400 million Americans into a super repository makes it the biggest target on earth for the bad guys. Will they get in? Oh yes. And then of course, because this holds the crypto, game over. That's it. So let me quickly finish off with entitlement. Entitlement, and Andrew talked a little bit about this earlier in terms of risk-based decisions. Entitlement is sort of the next stage on. Entitlement is this, it's making a risk-based decision about access to data or systems based on the trusted identity and attributes of all the entities and components in the transaction chain. If you understand from wetware, me, right the way through to e-commerce or access decision, ultimately, doesn't really matter whether it's e-commerce or some form of access, if you understand about all the components, so not only me, but the token I'm using, plus the PC I'm using or the mobile phone I'm using, plus the geolocation of the internet that I'm on, plus the servers that I'm talking to, plus the secure protocols I used, etc., 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 plus the value of the transaction that I'm doing, you can make entitlement decisions based on rules rather than access control lists. This works. This is really, really neat and makes business process slicker, faster and easier. This is an example, if you do it this way, of actually enabling the business. This is security enabling the business to run faster. Lots of examples out there of people who have done this, and it's really neat and works. And if you like pictures, this is from Cloud Security Alliance Guidance version 3. Again, if you're doing cloud and haven't read that, shame on you, to take Andrea's point earlier. Also, just as a total aside, nothing to do with this presentation, if you're doing cloud and haven't read the Data Protection Commissioner's guidance on cloud, which is, for a government document, is really, really easy to read, I'd thoroughly recommend it. So if you like it in pictures, here it is, identity and attribute sources, a business entitlement set of rules here that leads to authorization, and then access management to network systems, applications, process, and even granular data access. So you might want to say, actually, I want them to have access to data in these circumstances, but not that data with those circumstances. And again, we can talk about that offline over coffee. So, trust ultimately, I'm going to argue with you today, leads in this. Trust comes from being able to assert the immutable binding of the entity to the core identifier. And if you don't do this, it's building identity on sand, which is why in 20 years we have not fixed the problem of, on the internet, nobody knows you're a dog. So how it works, how it looks, this is Tom sitting at his laptop, and he's got a number of personas, and he can assert immutable binding, remember, I'm Tom, to his various personas out there. Same crypto, one-way linkage, so you can't hack this and go back up. Yeah, so this is one-way crypto. And I want to go to various places using that single core identifier up here. And I can now mix those, as I wish, attributes from those various personas to do the bits and pieces I need in my daily life. So here's our hacker. who would like to impersonate Tom, which is what they do at the moment, and he comes along and tries to hack his e-commerce persona. Well, he might hack his e-commerce persona, but he doesn't have his crypto, so he can't assert from it. So he might get to here, but he can't assert without the root crypto. So now, totally useless to him. If he tries to go direct, again, no good. So, as he says down there, drat foiled again. So have we solved the 6 conundrums? So coming back to the beginning of this, when we looked at these 6 conundrums. Immutable linking of the device, yes. Device is capable of asserting sameness. And you need to provide capability, so you know how the sameness was provided, what that immutable linking was, and chain of custody in this day and age. Can you do it globally? Yes, you can. Because simply asserting sameness at the root means that the US will accept Chinese and Chinese will accept US. Because you're not accepting that the Americans have done strong identity typing. All you're proving at this level is sameness. Persona-based, yes, one-way trusts. Ensures you can't link personas. That's crypto, that's easy. Yes, creating personas for authoritative sources negates the liability issue. So if the UK government says I'm over 18, they are the authoritative source of my date of birth, then where's the liability issue? Privacy enhancing? Yes, because I'm in total control. It's my bring your own identity. So I'm in total control about who I link to. And ultimately, is it extensible? Yes. Developing a standard with capability and an extensible form factor means it'll work anywhere. So with that, I'd argue that we can fix the problem. What we need to do is to work together to fix it, which is why I'm sort of standing here, not in my Jericho guise, but my new guise of this thing called the Global Identity Foundation. Seriously hot off the press, this was announced, the lawyers allowed us to announce this as RSA 3 weeks ago. So, working together to fix global identity is the plan. And with that,